Hey guys, so this video is going to be an updated best horror movies on Netflix video. I've done two of these videos in the past. The first one was done in 2014 and the second one was 2016, so I'm definitely due for an updated one of these. I will go ahead and link those two videos down below because I do recommend those movies in general, but I don't think any of them are on Netflix anymore because Netflix does kind of consistently change its content. Also, I purposefully left out all Netflix original movies and series from this list, so if you feel like I'm missing some that are obvious that are on Netflix, it's for a reason. I'm going to be doing a whole video on my favorite Netflix horror originals, so stay tuned for that. So first up, we have Would You Rather. I actually just rewatched this 2 nights ago because I was writing out this video and I was like, that's a great movie. I'm gonna rewatch that. So this is a gore fest. It is a torture style film. It's very similar to Saw in a way, kind of the similar kind of gore that you're gonna want to expect when you go into it, but I think this movie is executed much better than Saw. So the lead in this movie is Brittany Snow, and this also stars Sasha Grey, which is interesting. She's not terrible in it. She's not the best actor in the world, but fun fact, Sasha Grey actually grew up around me, so. Anyway, the story is basically a group of people who come together to play this game that is hosted by this rich family, and then whoever wins takes home a large sum of money. It's kind of similar, it's basically if Saw met House on Haunted Hill. So you got lots of gore, but you still got a little game in there of a group of people fighting for a lot of money. It's not what you expect, I think. It's very disturbing. A lot of it is disturbing and sad, and just, you know, the ending isn't what you expect it's going to be, so, you know, there's kind of a twist in there, and overall it's just a really well done movie, and I think it's kind of underrated. I think a lot of people love it in the horror community, but I think not a lot of people have talked about it lately, so I'm bringing it up again now. Next up, we have The Village. Now, I recently discovered that a lot of people think this is M. Night Shyamalan's worst movie, which is so funny to me because this movie is one of my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movies, and I think it is so underrated. This film was released in 2004, which is one of my favorite decades for horror, is early 2000s, and it stars Bryce Dallas Howard, which you might recognize from Black Mirror, and then it also stars Joaquin Phoenix. So this follows an isolated village set in Pennsylvania in the 19th century, and basically they are kind of being tormented or haunted, I guess, by these monsters that live in the woods, so they're not allowed to leave their village or go into the woods. But of course, it's M. Night Shyamalan, and it has a huge twist in the end, and I think it's one of his more successful twists. I think that's why a lot of people hate it, is because of the twist, because of course it's not what you think. It's never what you think it is going to be when you're watching an M. Night Shyamalan movie. Also, the cast had to go through a 19th century boot camp to really understand the time period that they were filming in, so they'd really like get into the characters. I don't know what that entails necessarily. Maybe they just had to like live in a village very similar to this with no electricity, no phones, no technology at all, and just like live off the land. What do you think a 19th century boot camp would be? I kind of want to do it. Next up, we have a film that I have seen so many times. It's one of my favorites, and it is As Above, So Below. Again, I think it's another one of those where it's you love it or you hate it, because a lot of people seem to not like this movie. This movie came out in 2014, and it's directed by John Eric Dowdle, who also did the movie Devil and the American version of the movie Quarantine, which I actually really like. Again, I think kind of underrated. So I think this is a really unique film about a group of kind of explorers, and they go into the abandoned catacombs beneath Paris, and obviously weird things happen down there because they're not really alone, you know, you kind of expect that. I thought it was really cool because this is the first movie that the French government has actually allowed filming in the Paris catacombs. Wow, that sentence was so hard for some reason. It is the only movie that's been filmed in the Paris catacombs. So they did actually go and film in the real catacombs. The skeletons that you see in the movie are indeed real skeletons. I think some of the things in the movie are a little cheesy, and I think that's why some people don't like it. There's jump scares in it that are just completely unnecessary. Now, obviously, this movie is very symbolic. Like, I recommend, if you've seen it, to look up the deeper meaning behind it, because it's definitely not just surface level stuff. It's good on its own, just surface level as a movie, but I highly recommend looking into the meanings of everything and the stuff they go through and what it represents and stuff like that, because it's a whole other level of enjoying the movie, I think. And also watch it more than once, because you really pick up on other things that you didn't. I'm a little distracted because my cat, I let him outside onto the patio, but I have to have the door shut for filming because of the noise, and I'm just like making sure he doesn't jump the fence. So the next movie is Green Room, and this is one that, again, is very loved in the horror community. A lot of people talked about this. A lot of people have seen it, so sorry if you've seen some of these movies. I'm just kind of picking the best ones that are on Netflix, you know? But this came out in 2014 and is directed by one of my favorite directors, Jeremy Saulnier. He also did Blue Ruin, Hold the Dark, and Murder Party. Loved all of those. They're very all different from each other too. So Green Room is about a punk band that is touring. They're at this venue. It's actually a skinhead venue, and it's but they witness something that happens in the venue, and then they get trapped in there, and they're just basically trying to escape. It's a very violent movie and much gorier than you'd probably expect from this kind of plot. So it's kind of more of a crime thriller, but to me, because of the gore and everything and the suspense, it's definitely can be considered a horror movie. So this was actually Anton Yelchin's last film before he sadly passed away. When he was trapped, his car rolled down his driveway and pinned him against his gate, and he died. So this was the last movie that he had done. This movie did have a really high budget, in my opinion, of $5 million, which is pretty decent. So a lot of the gore is really, really done well, and the movie does, in general, feel really realistic. You wanna come back in? He wants in. Next we have Emily. I think this is one that's not really well known. It's kind of more of an indie type film that not a lot of people hopefully have seen. I'm hoping that there's some in this list that you haven't seen and you have something to watch tonight. But this is a 2015 movie that is about a babysitter that kind of takes things a little too far with the kids. And it is disturbing. I'm just gonna say that. I think that this isn't really like a generic babysitter film, and it's pretty original in the story. I mean, the story's kind of been done before, but given that the babysitter is more of the antagonist, it's less of the have you checked the children type trope, you know? I really don't want to give away any more of the movie than that, but I really liked this movie. I kind of want you guys to discover all of it on your own and figure out why it's disturbing on your own. But I would say give it a chance because it's pretty entertaining. It's not the best film on this list, but it is something that's hopefully new to you that you haven't seen yet. So the next one is a controversial choice, but it is one of my favorite movies, and that is Chernobyl Diaries. It is one of my favorites, even though on some technical and ethical levels it's not the greatest. You can call it a guilty pleasure if you want, but I don't really use that term anymore. So this movie is directed by Oren Peli, who brought us the amazing Paranormal Activity movies, but don't let that deter you because I think Chernobyl Diaries is in general better than Paranormal Activity. It's nothing like it, by the way, but I'm just, you know, gonna defend it a little and defend him a little. I really like the Paranormal Activities series. I think it's a classic, but I know not everyone is a fan. So this movie follows a group of young travelers who book a trip to Pripyat. Is that how you pronounce it? I don't know. Which you can actually do in real life, by the way. You can go on a tour. They become stranded in this town of very high radiation, and they start to realize that maybe not everyone escaped when the reactor exploded. Overall, I think it's really good. There's some cheesy parts, of course. I mean, Jesse McCartney's in it. But have an open mind. I think it's good, and overall just a really haunting movie that is just, it's just good. It's just good. It just is. I don't know. It's cheesy, but it's good. Speaking of cheesy, The Haunting of Molly Hartley is also on this list because it's on Netflix, which I'm very happy about because I love this movie. It is, again, you could call it a guilty pleasure, but I don't feel that guilty about it. I like it. It's technically not a great movie, but because I love teen horror so much, I think that's why I love this movie. And it's so different from a teen horror. It's not just like they're camping or whatever. It's like kind of demonic. Not really possession, but like demonic. I've talked about it a lot on my channel, so I'm not gonna go too into it because I've mentioned it in I don't know how many videos. Next up is The Witch. Again, this is one I think everyone knows about and everyone's seen by now, but I just wanted to point out it is on Netflix, and I think it's one of the better movies that are on Netflix right now. I think it's one that was very well received by the horror community, kind of. I don't know, I've seen so many different thoughts about this. I've seen a lot of people who hate this movie from the horror community, but I think in general it was the general public that didn't really understand the movie and that the horror people liked it. I don't know. I felt like that was the case for me and my friends. In case you haven't heard about it and living under a rock, it takes place in 1630, which is 62 years prior, or it takes place with the first witch hysteria 62 years prior to the Salem witch trials. Personally, I love a good period piece, and if you make it a horror, it's 10 times better. I'm sure so many people have already seen this. It was very popular back in 2015 and 2016 when it came out, but I just wanted to put it on this list because it is one of the better ones, and if you haven't seen it yet, maybe take the time to do it now. Next up is The Monster. This is one that I think not a lot of people have seen, but it is definitely one of those hidden gems on Netflix. I actually saw it not on Netflix. I saw this a long time ago, but it's another horror movie that I have not heard anyone talk about it ever. It came out in 2016. It follows a mom and daughter. She's driving her to her dad's house, and she's kind of a neglected mother, and they break down on this deserted road, and then given time they kind of realize that they're not alone and they're surrounded by woods. I mean, they realized they were surrounded by woods, but then they realize the woods have something in it. I think it's a pretty simple film. It's definitely an easy watch. It all kind of takes place in one night, so it's just one of those you can pop on and just enjoy, and not, you know, it doesn't take too much brain power or anything. And lastly, this is going to be in another video, so I'm not going to go too much into detail about this movie, but I did want to mention it because I don't know if a lot of people have seen it, if it's even considered a horror movie, but that is Deliverance. This is definitely the oldest movie that is on this list. It came out in 1972. It's definitely more of an adventure thriller. I don't know if you'd consider it a horror movie, but because there are so many disturbing aspects to this, and definitely trigger warning for this movie, maybe look that up before you go into it because it's kind of brutal. So it follows a couple friends going on a canoeing trip, and they're kind of going on this river because they're gonna build a dam, and then it's gonna flood this whole town basically. And it is based on a novel by James Dickey, and it's interesting because he was present for some of the filming of this movie, and he actually got in a fist fight with the director because he had changed some of the lines and some of the script. Also, Dickey was a little intoxicated. So I think the 70s was a really good decade for horror, and this is one that kind of encapsulates that as well because it has a lot of the realistic elements in it that a lot of 70s movies had at the time. You know, a lot of practical effects. All the characters and actors in the movie did their own stunts, and one of the actors actually broke his coccyx when going down a waterfall because when they tried to use a dummy, it just looked too fake. They also cast a lot of the locals in the town to portray some of the characters, so it all just felt very realistic, like you could believe everything that was happening, which made it that much more disturbing. And I do feel like that's something that movies nowadays are lacking. A lot of movies are very overproduced and over the top and feel very unrealistic because they're just unattainable. The effects and the CG that we use nowadays is just so great that we can't relate anymore, and it doesn't feel as real. But I think the 70s was such a good era because they used a lot of practical effects and a lot of, you know, did their own stunts and a lot of those kind of basics that make it really good, and this movie definitely portrays that. And if you liked that little teaser of the 70s decade, look forward to my next series on this channel. Anyway, those are my top 10 best horror movies that are on Netflix as of right now of filming this. So sorry if they come and go and you see this a year later and they're not there. I just wanted to do an updated one in case you don't know what to watch and you need some new horror movies to watch. I've been thinking about doing the same kind of video but for Hulu because, I mean, there's not much on there, but they got some things. So maybe I could do a Hulu just in case that's all you have and you don't have Netflix. Let me know if you would want to see a Hulu, top horror on Hulu kind of thing. Anyways, make sure to leave a comment down below telling me your favorite horror movie that is on Netflix currently, and that way we all have new stuff to watch. So I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.